Fellow Ghanaians, good morning. So yesterday, Ghana lost one of its towering figures, a woman whose life was stitched into the very fabric of our politics, our social movements, and our collective conscience, Nana Konadu Agyeman-Rawlings. She was Ghana's longest-serving First Lady, and she passed away tragically. She was not just the wife of a revolutionary. She was herself a revolution, a fierce, uncompromising, articulate, and purposeful woman. Her life, from the corridors of Achimota school to the heart of Ghana's politics, it is a story of power, resilience, and relentless conviction. She was born in Cape Coast in 1948, but Nana Konadu was destined for public life long before history found her. She attended Achimota school, then went on to the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology, where she studied art, textiles. She later took up further studies in the United Kingdom, honing her discipline and artistic sensibilities before returning home to a country on the cusp of immense change. Fate, it seemed, had reserved her a central role in all of this. When Jerry John Rawlings burst onto Ghana's political scene in 1979, Konadu was already by his side, a partner in every sense, intellectually, emotionally, and politically. But to define her only by her husband's shadow would be an injustice to the woman that she was. She was a force of nature. She was bold, unrelenting, and unafraid to disturb the status quo. When she became First Lady, she refused to be confined to the ceremonial expectations of that role. She built, she organized, and she inspired. Through the 31st December Women's Movement, she reimagined what empowerment could mean in real, practical terms. It wasn't just rhetoric. It was a movement that built schools, provided health care, created job opportunities, and gave millions of women a voice. In the 1980s and 90s, her work brought education and childcare facilities to every corner of this country that government bureaucracy had forgotten. Many of the preschools she helped establish still exist to today. Quiet monuments to her vision of a Ghana where women and children were not afterthoughts in national development. She saw women not as beneficiaries of benevolence, but as agents of transformation. She said often that this country could not advance if women were left behind, and she lived that belief. She insisted on women's involvement in decision-making, in governance, in the economy, and in shaping their communities. And while her activism was often controversial, it was always clear. Nana Konadu Agyeman-Rawlings wanted women to move from the margins to the center of power. She was ahead of her time, and perhaps that was her greatest gift, and perhaps burden. To be a woman so far ahead of her generation that even those she fought for could not fully understand her. Her years as First Lady were not without controversy. She had admirers who adored her and critics who saw in her ambition a challenge to male-dominated political order. She clashed with party men, bureaucrats, and sometimes even her own allies. But that was the pride of her defiance. That was the price of her defiance. She would not be told when to speak or when to be silent. And when she finally broke ranks with the National Democratic Congress, the now governing NDC, the very party her husband founded to form the National Democratic Party in 2012, many were left shocked. But if you knew Nana Konadu Agyeman-Rawlings, you knew she would rather walk alone on her own than march in a crowd that had lost its way. Her decision to run for president around that time cemented her place in history as Ghana's first woman to lead a political party into a presidential election. It was symbolic, even if victory was elusive. It reminded Ghanaian women that ambition was not a sin, that power was not reserved for men, and that leadership could have a woman's face and still be firm, visionary, and courageous. Beyond politics, Nana Konadu's story is one of endurance and loyalty to her family, to her beliefs, and to the idea of Ghana she dreamed of. She was a woman who carried herself with dignity even when the world was unkind, who never retreated into self-pity. She met criticism with confidence and hostility with composure. Like all of us mortals, she had her own flaws. She was mortal. But even her critics could not deny her industry, her discipline, and her unmatched determination. Her passing now closes an extraordinary chapter in our nation's history. With her goes one of the last symbols of an era when politics was still a moral argument about service and sacrifice, not just self-interest and spectacle. Nana Konadu's generation built institutions and movements that still define Ghana's democratic and social architecture. She inspired a generation of women who dared to enter the public sphere, to organize, to speak, and to lead. Today, every woman who stands at a political podium, every woman who occupies a seat in parliament, every woman who runs a CSO owes something, whether they admit it or not, to the trail she blazed. Her loss is not just the passing of a person, but the end of an entire era. It is a call to reflection on what kind of politics we have built since a time, what kind of leaders we have produced, and what kind we have done with the freedom the generation of hers fought to secure. The 31st December Women's Movement may have quieted, but its vision is unfinished. In the villages where her preschools once stood as symbols of hope, in the faces of market women who found confidence through her empowerment programs, in the voices of so many young women who now aspire to political office, there lies the living memory of Nana Konadu Agyeman-Rawlings. In her later years after the death of her husband, she remained dignified. She stayed out of needless controversy, spoke rarely, and when she did, it was with grace and authority. Those who saw her recently say she exuded strength, regal, articulate, and calm. Her life had come full circle, from a young Achimota girl with dreams to the first lady who became one of Ghana's most formidable political figures. And so, fellow Ghanaians, as we mourn Nana Konadu Agyeman-Rawlings, we also celebrate. We celebrate a woman who refused to be written out of history, who turned privilege into purpose, and who proved that power could be used to lift others, not just oneself. We must celebrate her courage to dissent, to build, to fight, and to stand, even when standing alone was costly. Fellow Ghanaians, death will come for us all. But legacy does not die. Nana Konadu Agyeman-Rawlings lit a torch that will not go out. Her work for women, her belief in the power of organization, her call for self-reliance, these remain timeless. She was human, imperfect. She was fierce, sometimes polarizing, but always purposeful. That's what true public life demands. And as we prepare to lay her to rest, may we honor her not with empty praise, but with reflection. May we ask ourselves what kind of Ghana we are building for the next generation of women, whether our politics still has space for conviction, of courage, and sacrifice. Because that was her message, spoken and unspoken, that a nation rises not on slogans, but on the substance of those who dared to serve it. So we say, rest well, Madam Nana Konadu Agyeman-Rawlings. You were a woman of strength, and history will not forget your name. Good morning, fellow Ghanaians.